All right, we got a weird one for you today. Weird for a number of reasons. One, I got a martini, I got a cigar. Just came from outside where I have been finally finishing up The Heart of Europe, Peter Wilson. This is what I would call a pretty significantly scholarly popularized history. Okay, it's not. It's obviously not, a grad student's thesis or something like that, going into incredible details about any single thing. However, it handles a huge, broad scope of the entirety of the period from the establishment to the end of the Holy Roman Empire, covering many, many different aspects of it in a lot of detail. And I've been reading this for over 5 years. I picked it up because it's one of a couple of subjects that really intrigues me. And I sometimes toy with the idea of a game based on it. I've been toying with a game based on the Empire for, Jesus Christ, 40 years, There's a lot of games based on the era of the 30 Years' War. There's a fair amount of games based on the religious controversies, the rise of Protestantism, etc. Here I'm thinking things like Here I Stand and A Mighty Fortress. But they're not the only ones. Most of these games end up... First of all, I'm not that excited about the period that they're presenting because, okay, they're both interesting topics. There's no question, and I love Here I Stand. don't get me wrong there, but in the case of each of them, you're talking about a situation where the Habsburgs are already emperors, they're already settled, and it really becomes, you're not really that invested in the political machinations within the empire itself. Now, what I wanted was, I guess, to find something that would lead to the solidification or even just the establishment of the Habsburgs as the dominant family in the empire. Yeah, I gotta light cigars a lot too. At least when I'm talking. I don't smoke enough when I'm talking. Okay. So this did not do that at first. In fact, I trudged through it and then got to just the last, the last couple of years after I finished the main of the story. There's a timeline of the entire empire going over all the elements. And that is what I should have read first. That would have focused me on the period that I'm most interested in. And it would have clarified what I was going for. And reading this has re-excited me about possibly going back into the book immediately. to look for more information about that period, because this does go into a tremendous amount of detail in the various subjects it deals with. Lots of maps, lots of all kind of stuff. One of the problems that I had was kind of focusing, because when I'd look at like histories like this previously, and I've read a few, what I kind of came to was, geez, I mean, all the territories change and everything. How can you do it with something other than like a computer game like Crusader Kings? And I can't really explore it the way I want to in a computer game. The different family trees, just all kind of additional, all kind of information that's terribly useful. I'm looking for the table of contents though, which is the thing I want to find. There we go. All right. So the book itself is divided into different parts dealing with major aspects behind the empire. So like part one is the ideal, okay? And it talks about, the holy aspect of it, the imperial aspect of it, right? It's got 3 sections: 2 swords, Christendom, and sovereignty. And I don't really remember these terribly. But the concept that essentially this was a replacement for the Western Empire, the Western Roman Empire. A little later, significantly later, but an attempt to resurrect that concept of someone who is primary in both political realm, but also to some extent in the religious realm. Now, obviously, given the way that Charlemagne, as the founder of the HRE essentially, ends up accepting a coronation by the Pope, it kind of indicates that, yeah, there's a certain subservience there to certainly within the religious side of things. But that idea of like there being a secular and a religious leader, and those being divided, and one for all of Christendom, or at least of all of Catholicism, because obviously the Eastern Empire had maintained and had its own, and that's the other subject that I'm not interested in, had maintained and had its own, structures, etc. But the idea of a nation that would, or a structure that was a combination of sort of the imperial legacy, the religious side of things, and then also the ancient Germanic, the Romans are ancient, the religion is close enough, the ancient Germanic concepts of an elected ruler really appealed to me, and felt like such a wonderful grounds for some sort of struggle, that could be portrayed in a game form. So, it goes into this concept, though, of all of this within a section, this ideal section, running the entire gamut of the time. And it's like, so I'm immersing myself as I read this first part in, the core concepts to the empire, but sort of not really dealing with the politics or anything like that at the same time. which left me feeling a little disassociated. And that's the problem I had with the whole book, and why I wish I had read the appendix that was the timeline, which is just wonderful. I mean, it's quite large, actually. The timeline itself, the chronology, is not huge. It's about 50 pages, a little bit more, of little entries like this, which I find, very much helped me focus on where I wanted to go, right? And the period that I actually wanted to deal with. And I had many options, right? Because it wouldn't necessarily be the Habsburgs. It could be other periods, and maybe I'd focus on other periods. But what I kind of settled on, if I were to try to design the thing that I want, is on that period, not leading up to the first Habsburg Empire, but rather leading up to the consolidation of statehood of the various powers, and Austria included, and the different options. And I sort of have an idea of what that framework would be. I'm not sure about what the mechanisms would be, but that's more a game design type of thing. So no worry there. Well, I mean, lots of worry there, because I don't have I've tried creating something along this lines as kind of something of an abstract, just like, can I get this working, many, many years ago. And I'm thinking about revisiting that. The next one is Belonging, Lands, Identities, and Nation. And again, it's looking at, the why various independent or semi-independent rulers who were subsumed to the empire were able, how they functioned and whatever, and how they saw themselves within that. And this is particularly important to me because in the period that I'm looking at or thinking about, and yet hadn't fully consolidated my view on, it's relatively important to understand the boundaries of the empire, because certainly states like Austria had extra imperial territories, and later on, much later on, beyond the period I'm thinking about, you have things like Saxony holding the Polish crown and stuff like that. So that was of interest. Governance, though, again, another section. This is the third part in it. Really, really important to my concept. And it holds it has three sections: kingship, territory, and dynasty, which express, again, sort of the political aspects of it more. Then the final section, society, authority, association, and justice. I found this got me too much into the weeds in a lot of places, and this is why the book took so damn long to read, was I was hitting this section and just saying, oh my God, have I gotten anything out of this yet that is going to help motivate me, help move me towards something that I wanted to do? Something I wanted to do for a long time. One of the problems I had with earlier books was that, I would look at, they would express the empire from a more political standpoint alone, but when I'd read through them, I'd see the changing maps and I'd be like, I can't, unless I have tons and tons of little locations, the way, say, Crusader Kings does, I can't really express just which territories any particular person holds. And I think I can get around that more by focusing in on specific period or periods, but and show the rise of particular families in times where the leadership of the empire was in question. And that way I don't have to redistribute the lands throughout the entire course of the game, which could be done, but would be painful to represent on a map. And then actually the final thing, which is kind of loose on its own, is the afterlife, discussing the 19th century repercussions, essentially. This is readable. There's no question about that. It's, it's a heavy read, but it's readable. It is indeed a popularized version, and as such, I found it, accessible enough for me, at least as a starting point. And then beyond that, the problem was assimilating all the information in such a thick book covering such a humongous period of time. And that's really the struggle that I had. And I wish that I had read the chronology first, because that would have sparked me and I would have said, okay, now I'm going to read the sections and delve into them. Now, I might still do that. I'm not going to just toss this behind my boxes or whatever. I think I'm going to keep this around and try pushing through it again, in specific, looking towards the period where my interest is, and then try to find, perhaps other works that I can pull better information or deeper information for the few things that I'm really most interested in focusing on. Before I start doing that, though, I have to come up with some kind of general mechanism for the game that I've got in mind or whatever. And I wouldn't expect anything from me. I've, very seldomly, although this is what I've done on this so far, back in my 20s or whatever, is about as far as I got with anything. So, it's not a bad choice of something for me to work on. But yeah, I've done sort of very early sketching prototypes of games for this, for religious spread of various religions, and for the conquest of Mexico, and then, my role-playing game, but yeah, that probably got the most effort of all. If you are interested in the history of the empire, this is a pretty damn good choice. It was the most highly recommended thing I could find by far online. So therefore, if you're already looking for this, you don't need my review for it. But if you're thinking, geez, back in the 80s and 90s, I couldn't find a damn thing. Yeah, this is probably the thing you're looking for to give you a really good view of the entirety, running from the Carolingians all the way to Napoleon, basically, destroying the empire. To give you a really good overview of what's going on in some sort of detail, as opposed to just what the chronology gives. Now, something like the chronology I could have found online, right? But the point here is that I wish I had had it I wish it had been the first thing that I had looked at just to direct my own inquiry better and to understand what I wanted from this book more than anything else. There are other periods that I could see playing around with, other periods that involved the rise of a particular family or you know, a particular situation where there were a couple of major families that were conflicting, etc. I just happened to find the period that the Habsburgs solidified and enhanced their control over various areas, their marriage into the Luxembourg family, and stuff like that, that I found particularly valuable, and looks like the closest to the game that I want to create in terms of having a lot of different players. Not a huge amount, but I can easily fit like 6 players into that without it being problematic. Whereas a lot of the others, it's like 2 players and then a bunch of weaker powers that maybe I can make an argument for them as players. So yeah, I'm more excited about this book than I have been since I ordered it, basically. And we'll see what it comes to. But yeah, it is a very very. It has a sense of completeness to it, essentially. All right, that's all I'm going to give you. I'll go back to sitting outside and reading a magazine or something.